And now I'm calling our first pitcher group. It's from Regensburg. OTH Regensburg, bitte auf die Bühne. Come please to me and don't sing. Yes. What means OTH, by the way?
Ostbayerische Technische Hochschule.
Okay, East Bavarian Technical Hochschule, University. Okay, so the stage is yours. Do you got slides prepared? I hope so. Okay. So 2 more seconds. We will be prepared. Okay. Get it? Maybe we need technical support. Do we? Hello, hello, help. F5. I was told F5. F5. Hey, hero, who was it? Thank you so much. So.
Hello. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to share our vision, opinion on this topic. We are students from OTH Regensburg, and we come here to talk about the political strategy to achieve digital sovereignty in Europe. And according to our opinion, 6 areas has to be addressed. And the first area is, as written over there, is control over personal data, like for organization or institutes. And then the technology independence, as we can see in Europe, like all giant software company come from America, and in the second time from China. And then information security, as we have to make sure that our tech are safe. And then access to digital technologies, like everyone in Europe has to have ability to access to the technology or the service has to be given, provided, I can say. And then efficiency of administration, like organization and institute have to work efficiently. And the last one is economic growth.
Okay, so based on our research, which relied heavily on statements by NGOs and also feasibility and impact studies, we have come up with 3 political strategies which, when combined, address all 6 of these areas. Our first strategy involves strengthening the digital agency of EU citizens. To this end, the GDPR should be amended. I know we've covered this already, but and the right to anonymity on the internet should be established. This, of course, includes not having to use your real name, but also being able to use anonymous communication technologies such as Tor, which are currently still being repressed. Our second strategy involves nurturing open source software and hardware technologies. The Directive for Public Procurement should be modified with the long-term aim of using only open source software and, where possible, hardware in the public sector. So that this can be done well, there should be a support system in place. For example, there could be an EU-wide network of open source program offices concrete recommendations for which software should be used in critical infrastructure. And most importantly, barriers to the use and development of open source technologies should be reduced. For example, with free security audits or with tax incentives for companies which contribute to open source, by giving open source developers more legal protection, by making software patents inadmissible, and by obligating companies to release hardware designs, firmware, and source code when a product reaches its end of life. And our final political strategy concerns investments. Public investments should be properly evaluated, for example, with feasibility and impact studies, but also re-evaluated at regular intervals to make sure they are having the desired impact. Additionally, technologies used in everyday life should be prioritized. Of course, this includes chips, which we've already spoken about a lot today with but also one thing that I think has been overlooked a little bit is smartphones, because everybody has at least one, but there are hardly any manufacturers of smartphones in Europe. And this is important because if for some reason our supply were to be cut off, everyday technologies are where we would feel it first and hardest. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good. Can I start? Thank you so much, and I really like these 6 areas. It's a pretty cool structure, and also these 3 political strategies. Now, have you thought about what would be the most challenging of these strategies to be implemented?
Well, I would say strengthening the digital agency of EU citizens, because this would involve a lot of regulation and, as has already been said multiple times today, that takes a lot of time and you have to get all the countries on board.
Yeah, I can add something on what she said. And according to me, the most challenge it can be also when it's come for creating a European cloud, because there is always this risk to take, because it's difficult to create this such of clouds when we know that the competitor mostly are from America and China. So there must be more study on it, how to make it to come on the same level to compete with America or China. That would be the most challenging part of this implementation, if I can say.
Yeah, and this could be achieved by nurturing open source, which is why we put such a heavy emphasis on it.
Yeah, interesting.
So perhaps a question for the open source. A lovely idea. Do you see that there's any risk associated to move so strongly towards open source?
I think the most difficult thing about open source is that it conflicts with people's ideas of how industry works. So people would be worried that if they develop open source software, they wouldn't make enough money. But I actually work for a company which uses only open source software and develops only open source software, so it can be done. And it also has a lot of advantages, because if we use software that has bugs, we can fix them ourselves, which is often much faster than waiting for the developers of the software to fix them.
If I can add to that, I have another question around the risks of open source. Do you see that you have an enhanced IT security risk because of using open source, because the risks embedded in the open source code is visible to everyone?
Quite the opposite. I would say that security by obscurity is a very, very bad idea. And by making the source code visible, users and white hat hackers can more easily find the problems with them. So actually, this would increase security and not lower it.
Okay, thanks.
Maybe a question a little bit more on, that's a strategy, which is really good, and thank you for that. How to operationalize it? When you have a strategy, you want to make a tactic, and afterwards have an operational implementation. For example, what would be criteria to decide on investments? When you say real rate investments, what would be criteria? Which programs are worth of investing?
Well, there are already quite a few impact studies on which investments would have the greatest impact for the EU. In fact, that's part of the reason why we prioritize open source, because there is a study by the European Commission, which the Fraunhofer Institute was heavily involved in, which estimates a 1-to-4 cost-benefit ratio of open source. So this would have a huge impact on economic growth, among other things. And impact studies such as this should be done more extensively. At least I wasn't able to find any EU regulations that say that they should be done before investments are allowed to be done.
Okay, thanks. To add another question, you call for right to anonymity, which I think is very timely, and you did this before. Elon Musk said that he actually wants to authenticate everyone on Twitter. So I wonder, and that's maybe also a question I tie to other points, how to contextualize this and where you would also make exceptions. Yeah, I see your point with Tor and the upside of anonymity. But on the other hand, we have great concerns, for example, concerning the Telegram use and the way many people behave on what is called dark social web. So how would you strike a balance? How far to take this right of anonymity?
I think that from a German perspective, due to our fairly recent history, anonymity would outweigh trying to stop criminal activity up to a certain point. Could you repeat the question, please?
And also for our European, because of course we're talking about European digital sovereignty, so I wonder with many of the points you make here, how to contextualize them a little bit more, and I use anonymity just as an example. So how far should this right of anonymity go, and how would you frame exceptions to it? Or do you consider any exceptions to right to anonymity?
First of all,
online?
we use it because everyone can express his idea easily when he knows that no one can take his privacy, no one can identify his profile. And this can help to protect personal data, to protect personal data of user against every hacker or black hat, as you just mentioned. That is the reason we use this anonymity as an example. I need to make you understand.
And what about hate speech and the problems we face here? I mean, we have manifest problems of people, mayors and people in parties who expose themselves, and they receive a lot of hate mail. So if there is no possibility at all to track those people who would profit from this right and also be persons engaging in public discourse but then hiding themselves, how should we deal with this question? What do you tell a mayor who says, I receive hate mail every day?
That is a very good point. I think that finding a balance here would be very difficult. I mean, the obvious answer to the mayor would be to use better spam filters. But obviously that isn't an option everywhere on the net. On Twitter, there is the option of not showing notifications or messages from throwaway accounts. For example, if it's a very new account, if it doesn't have followers, if it doesn't have a profile picture, that sort of thing. And anonymity on the internet doesn't mean that user data can't be collected. It just means that it would have to be restricted to how it can be used. For example, companies that have access to multiple profiles by the same user shouldn't be allowed to combine this data from different profiles. So that doesn't really answer your question. The point I'm trying to make is that anonymity on the internet doesn't necessarily mean absolute anonymity. It means that users can be completely anonymous, but I don't see any reason why choosing to be anonymous shouldn't have negative consequences when using social media, such as.
So you would need something like a neutral instance managing the anonymous data.
Yes, that is part of the reason why personally I like the idea of decentralized solutions like Mastodon, but that again has its own problems with filter bubble and yeah. So finding a comprehensive solution which addresses all the possible problems, I'm not sure is even possible. Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you so much.
So we're working on solutions. That's why we're here, aren't we? Thank you to East Bavaria and OTH Regensburg.